What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Off the Deep End Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Eddie, and today we are meeting with my brother, Thomas, and I'm so thankful and excited to share his journey and his experiences with all of you. There's nothing more important than passing on knowledge to the next generation of human beings behind us and leaving something for the rest of the world to benefit from. I think this guy does a great job of it. A lot of selfless actions that he's partaken in, and I've experienced personally the positive influence that one person can have via his example. So I'm so thankful. And without that, let's jump straight into the conversation. This is a one and only one time disclaimer that this conversation will have some heavier aspects to it. So I would like to forewarn you that there will be talk about veteran suicide, loss of life while deployed, and much more. So please do take everything with a grain of salt. And if you need to take a break, please do. If you want to chat after this and decompress a little bit, please do reach out to us on Facebook. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for your time and much love, y'all. Before we continue, I want to just let you know that here at Off the Deep End Podcast, we do talk about some things that can be extremely triggering for some of the listeners, whether it's domestic violence, suicide prevention, mental health resources, veteran stories, active shooters, fitness, and even recovering from addictive substances. There's only one place I go to spread my message of positivity about not just going through things, but growing through them as well. For this, I use Anchor.fm. It allows my listeners to listen on over 7 platforms with a click of a button. Make sure you download Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started sharing your story. All right, welcome everybody. How are you all doing today? I am so thankful that it's a beautiful Friday. I'm joined by a very special guest, somebody who I have a lot of respect for, not just because of transparency, but honesty. Different characteristics aren't used today in modern society. Being a good person doesn't necessarily mean you have the easiest life, or that that you're in law enforcement, or that you're a firefighter running into burning buildings. It can also mean that you are truthful, kind, you care about your fellow human being, and that is someone we are blessed to sit down with today. So thank you so much, Big Dog, for sharing your time.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I appreciate it.
So let's start from the start of the starts. I always love to do this because it sets the stage. Tell me about growing up for you. What was it like in your childhood? Tell me, what was Thomas like when life first started?
I was a hellion. I was much like my 3-year-old kid, Theseus. Um, I don't have a very good relationship with my family, so kind of contextual. My childhood was very rough. I grew up in almost every city down in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon that you can think of. I think I never went to a school for more than a year until I was actually out of high school. But I had a mom with an eighth grade education with 2 kids, no dad, a lot of childhood trauma, physical violence, abuse. But my mom was a really hard worker. Even though she could qualify for every single state assistance program, she was a rosy riveter. If she could fix anything, do anything, she had 5 older brothers, and she wasn't taking crap from nobody. And being the oldest of my family, um, and the only boy at that time, I had a lot of expectations. I had a lot of pressure. Uh, Come from a Sicilian family, so we are very in your face, using your hands, and forget about it. Right? As insensitive as it may seem, and that could have been cool as a kid, but a lot of that childhood trauma happened to me in high school. Ended up running away with my sister when I was 13 years old from my mom, and a stepdad, which, as I get older and older, I really wonder why I did it. Right? I see the rebelliousness of my 15-year-old stepdaughter. It's like, screw the rules, and I had the same thing. But ran away nevertheless to an absent father's parents, who were wealthy and wonderful, who took care of me until he basically came to try to support his 2 kids that his parents were taking care of for a while. And they bought my dad basically a house right next to the high school, helped him out financially. We moved in with him, and then a physical altercation went down between him and my sister within like 9 months of us moving in. I was withdrawn from high school beginning of my sophomore year. My grandmother was an old English teacher for high school, so she made me go get my GED. My sister kind of went to go live with his sister down in Oregon. So it gets really, really messy around the teenage years. But basically, when I turned 17, was caught red-handed stealing car stereos with a friend in Puyallup, Washington. Just trying to make an easy buck because I was tired of working at McDonald's on the weekends and taking the bus because I didn't have a driver's license. So basically just had a girlfriend. She was going to Gonzaga. She's with a rich family and was like, hey, you need to do something with your life. And decided, man, I don't want to go into like the active duty army and leave my family and all the great opportunities I have, which I've done at the time. So I decided to join the National Guard. And about 6 months into that decision, I found out that wasn't the best decision for me for 6 years, but nevertheless, don't regret it.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there, man. I got to be honest. You cruise right through it. I think you might have done this before and talked about it a couple of times, which is good because talking about the things we go through helps us realize, oh man, I wish I would have turned right or left at this point. We learn so many powerful lessons through what we go through. I say it all the time. We don't just go through it, grow through it. And you only grow through it when you look back and you see the seeds you sowed at an early age that you've watered over the years, subconsciously even, and the skills that you developed, the emotions that you attach to certain smells, certain memories, certain feelings. I remember thinking back to my childhood. I don't like to look at the bad parts, and I try to pretend like they didn't happen, but they did. They did, and saying that and acknowledging it will help me in the future be better for my children. And so I know for a fact, just after the few conversations we've had so far, you're going to grow through your lessons as well and share them with your children in a way that doesn't necessarily put them in the same situation, but will help them, all the same through them. And that's what a great father does. Something that you mentioned at a young age, you're a father figure assaulting your sister, right? And when you have children around you or people that you love around you being hurt, it does take a toll. Me personally, I've grew up in a household where there was people that go hands on. Like I've shared my story a couple times and talked about it, and I don't think it ever gets easier to talk about. No matter what, there's always this weird, fearful feeling about it. It's hard to accept that the person who's supposed to be your guardian, your sheepdog, your protector, strike you when for no reason, just out of anger and rage.
I agree. And, my mom, she wasn't like this ruthless person, right? She had an 8th grade education. And as I get older and the more wisdom I have and the more I want to just, wail off on my children, because trust me, there's times where, you want to get hands on with your kids too. And you have that moment. It's like, man, when mom was winding up with that 3-inch Bengals belt and the Tiger Woods swing on me, right? What did I learn in that moment when I got struck? What did I appreciate of it? And it was that mom just didn't know how to talk. She didn't know how to communicate, right? She was hurting deep inside. She wasn't supported. She had all these expectations from society, and the kids were the closest thing to letting that trauma out. And we carry it forward to our kids unless we break it.
Absolutely. I think breaking the cycle is essential for the next generation. I love how you brought that in a direct correlation with how you want to be for your children. We all act as a line, not just with genetics, not just with habits, not just with personality, smiles, noses, eyes. We can carry all these beautiful traits from beautiful people who are in front of us, but we can make the decisions what things to kind of omit, to remove from that passing of knowledge. I know that different tribes have shared for years knowledge from generation to generation, and how great is storytelling when you can choose what to be shared. I think we can apply the same thing in our culture here as Americans and as human beings, honestly, because we don't have to set the youth up for failure. We have some cheat codes because we experience that, and we can hold that weight for them.
I agree.
Absolutely, brother. So you joined the National Guard. And then where did that take you? Because you signed up for 6 years. You said, "Oh my God, I only did four in the Navy," and I decided that was enough for me because of a multitude of things. But I'm not gonna. It's not my
Right.
time. Please tell me about what it was for you.
Yeah, mine was like I said, I didn't have anything else going for me. I wanted to do something better with my life. I wanted to please the girl I was with, and joining the military was a thing. And I wanted to do something impactful after 9/11. Seeing people jump from buildings as their last choice, that hit me deeply. Um, there was just a large sense. I had family members too, uh, who had died in 9/11
Oh my
or
God.
gotten diseases from being in the cleanup crews at Ground Zero, and just not taking care of our first responders and healthcare providers. But the National Guard, 161 Infantry, we didn't get deployed for since World War II, so we missed Vietnam and Korea storms. So like it was pretty much their time to go. I had joined on the delayed entry process. 6 months after I got in, boom, we're getting orders for 18 months to Iraq. And there wasn't any, at that time, there wasn't any delineation between active duty and National Guard. Like your MOS was your MOS, no matter where you came from, we're all activated, it's go do the same. The really crappy part about the military, I like to, besides all the being an 18-year-old kid in a foreign country shooting at other people and not knowing the trauma I was going to bring home, right, was the transition. We talk a lot about transition services now, mainly for active duty, but in 2005, 2008, there was nothing there. When I came home, it was National Guard, hey, turn in your stuff and supply, get your TA-50 hand receipt, and go home, right? Like literally go home and go back out into the community. And I remember sitting on my couch as a 20-year-old kid, 2 weeks before my 21st birthday, just gotten done with a 18-month combat deployment in
18
Baghdad.
months.
Right. And so 18 months, I'm sitting on my couch. I'm literally got PTSD that's undiagnosed for almost a decade later. Like file a VA claim, get lost in the VA back for 7 years. So I'm sitting on my couch for the first month, like, you know, just basically smoking weed and jerking off on the couch playing video games, not knowing what to do with my life because I had no direction whatsoever. And looking at community college and delivering pizzas and like it didn't matter at that point because I was so broken. I had no transition. I had no peer support. Really, what it came down to, I had no peer support, no guidance, and it was very different from my active duty counterparts that came home. They went through TAPS, had this kind of a civilian transition back out in society. Whereas National Guard, I was just like broken as a 21 year old. I had no idea where to start. I had all this childhood trauma that carried through and just amplified it even more. So the military was wonderful. It was the transition out that just snapped me like a twig.
Mm. You brought up a lot of issues that hit vets. I know that for me personally, and for a lot of people I served with, the task program, it helped us get a job. It helped us sign up for benefits, but I got told personally, like when I was getting ready to transfer out medically, the medical examiner said, "All right, what's all going on with you?" And I told him, "Hey, I got this issue, this issue, this issue, this issue," and they were all very, very valid issues that I was experiencing. When you leave, you don't expect to come back broken at such a young age. Like 2021, I thought I was invincible. 22, I was broken. And coming back from a world tour on the TR, I came back and my knees, my back, I had fell 15 feet onto my spine, and I was laying there for about 10, 15 minutes before I could even get up to crawl. And then other times I've been hit in the head. I had TBIs, knee issues. I got a crate of bombs smashed into my knee when we were doing unrep, and I just limped on it for the rest of the deployment. Right, all these things because they tell you, what do they tell you? If you go to medical, you're a pussy, and the
Well,
last
now
thing you want to do is be harassed about everybody.
Well, and that was my thing too. Like as an infantryman, there's a huge masculinity within inside of that job. And I remember sitting in Baghdad, Iraq proper, and we are about to exfil. Right, it's like a couple days. We're sitting inside this makeshift chapel. We're going through the medical the processing, and it's basically like think of like like a just an open space like a VFW and a projector, right? And then there's chairs and there's all these veterans in there, all these service members in there, and they're filling out all the paper. But as they're filling out the paper, they're literally showing you the paper on the screen, the paper you have on your lap, and they're like, if you don't check everything that we have checked on this projector, you're staying behind. You're not going to see your family after this deployment. You're going to go through the med board process. So check no, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, I got 2 broken feet from the military. I got PTSD, sleep apnea, insomnia, depression, anxiety. On this piece of paper, everything is no, though, right? Because I wanted to transition out. I just wanted to get away from the horrors that I had seen, my friends dying, the multiple 21 gun salutes across our ponds, and the folded flags, and the blackouts for the phone traders because people needed to be contacted for their loved ones. Like, I just wanted to get away. And so many veterans that I've met in my life, they're like, yeah, military was great. I missed the camaraderie. I missed everything about the military. But on the way out the door, man, it's just like they slammed it in my face and I just dropped. I dropped because I thought I was so ready because of what I was doing. I was so proficient in the military, or I thought I had everything in place when I get home. And when you get home, and it's like, man, some of those support systems are good.
Yeah, it really bothers me too, and I try not to get too worked up when I'm hearing other people's stories, but it's enraging. The normal person doesn't think about, okay, well, I'm going to thank this person for their service, and it's really nice to see these people in the airports. I might give up my first class seat. I'm going to buy them a meal. All these gestures are huge, gigantic, tremendous ways of that people show their support for the military. But it's the military shooting its people in the foot. And I'm not talking shit generally about the entire United States military, because I love the military is who is in it. That is what makes the military. It's not the government, it's not the president or the orange one before it. It wasn't none of that. It's who it's in it. It's the people, your brothers and sisters who are willing to lay down their lives just so you can go home and see your family. People that give up going home when they have a fresh born baby so that you can go home to the 2 kids you have. For my stepdad, that was one of the most emotional stories I've ever heard. It's the people who are bitter, people who are frustrated, poor leadership, poor examples of um a your brother's keeper, right? You're not looking out after your battle buddy or your shipmate or your subordinate, depending on how people look at leadership. Leadership is very simple. You care about everybody underneath you and you treat all them like they're going to make you better, because they are. And if we take care of our sailors, soldiers, Marines, Coast Guards, whatever they call them, airmen, puddle pirates, I got to say it is what it is. Airmen, everybody, if we take care of them, we're not going to have anybody saying, okay, well, I'm fine. Yeah, you just get me out to my family, because they told me they were going to withhold my contract as well. I got persuaded, or I would say bamboozled and bullshitted into that. And now here I am years later trying to convince the VA, hey, I had this and this happened to me, and they're like, no, you didn't. I don't believe you. It's a funny game, and it's enraging that it happens to our veterans. What other aspects of transitioning out, other than the TAPS process, the medical transition, or do you face as far as the system? And then we'll get into the personal part.
Yeah, for me, I think obviously the military was a huge stepping stone for me. I wish I would have been smarter, not in like take my ASVAB test smarter. I mean, I wish I would have done better on that. Who doesn't? And join the Air Force or something that had like some transitional scope. As an infantryman, I just wanted to go kick doors in and blow shit up. Like I wanted to go get the benefits,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I played GI Joes and Ninja Turtles as a kid. I was the Red Power Ranger for I don't know how long before I became the Black Power Ranger. Like whoever's been in my wavelength in my head probably had the same dream. But that's where it stopped, right? And I think that's where creating more visions. You've talked to Josh Wilden and Tony Dayton, and there's so many within the Pacific Northwest, that community who have had, just really weird, wild stories, and they all come back to I think problems with transition, right? You'll find people who have just had wonderful transition stories. Man, I had this, and this. You had mentioned, people say thank you for your service by buying a coffee or first class ticket. Man, I'd love to just get a business loan, right? To go get a college degree and come out and have a business loan, be able to start my own business and start employing other veterans who have skills. Like a huge thing for me was a GI Bill, right? Most thankful thing that I could have ever gotten in my life by signing that dotted contract is my education benefits on top of my housing benefits. So there is wonderful things that I wasn't thinking of as a 18-year-old kid when I wanted to go kicking doors and all that stuff. But the main thing that I see with veterans is that transitional piece. Like it's a make it or break it thing. And same within higher education. Like you'll see 80% of veterans who have served go back and get some type of higher education degree or certification. But that doesn't count a lot of the ones that go through who was like me, in all honesty. It took me 3 years to get my associate's degree. My second one, because I had so many barriers in place with transition with housing, not from the military, but from incarceration. Luckily, I had a lot of those other barriers that were removed, like financial pieces. VA had me covered, right? Like everything was good to go, but I didn't have a house, right? I didn't have food. I could barely have a cell phone to text people and to get any type of peer or community support. So for me, transitional services, that's the piece that people need to really latch on into in the community because it's not just a year or two. Right? We all get out and, oh, cool, I got a job at the auto parts store. Successful transition in the Army's book. But where does that soldier go within the next 5 years? That's are they a leader in the community? Same way that they're a leader in the military. To me, that's a check mark of success.
Absolutely. I love that perspective, brother. I really do. There's a lot of things that go into the stigmas surrounding veterans transitioning. MVP, the movie Merging Veterans and Players, does a beautiful job talking about it, and they even share some insight into an actual meeting where people are discussing the thing they felt, the thing they experienced. You're watching people tear up and talk about, if it wasn't for my new unit, my new squad, my new platoon, my new division for the Navy, is what I would say. This is what you guys are it for me. I lost everybody personally when I left the military. Those were people like that held me when my dad died when I was deployed. Those were people that kept swept me under their wing and taught me things when other people wouldn't, because they saw that they were just being assholes. They were people who look out for me when I was at my darkest moments and was excited when I got married instead of doubtful, like the bad leadership I had and all these things. They thought I was just getting married for the military relationship, and it's a joke. Um, Real love is real love. You know what I'm saying? And when it works, it does, and when it doesn't, it doesn't. It's not your relationship. Don't worry about it.
Sometimes it's just a happy relationship for BAH, and that's
Yeah.
okay sometimes.
That too. That too. And I'm gonna say that everybody has different standards on their own relationships, right? And it's for them. It's not for everybody. But for me personally, I know I had a lot of issues with the transition when it comes to what do I do now. They they completely shunned me when I went to transition. What different things do you wish were out there for our veterans in order to make things better for a smoother transition? What would you, if you could literally play God for a second and change every aspect, what would you change?
So here's the thing, right? Like when you go looking for a job in the private sector, right, you know your skills and you know the job. So if you don't have any skills and you're looking for an entry level job, you're going to obtain all these skills listed on the job posting. So if you think the military is the same thing, I was an infantryman, right? SWAT team guy. Think of everything that you could basically do within a SWAT team member position, guns and body armor and cool vehicles and night vision goggles, all these cool things, right? Which are all the things that we use in combat as well to extract information, weapons, people, whatever it may be, right? Um, but in the military, if I was an infantryman, let's say for 20 years, wouldn't you think like I'd be a really good cop or corrections officer or anything that has to do with law enforcement with all those weapon handling skills, or be like a firearms instructor or something like that? There isn't really a direct like translation from an infantryman straight out, right? To whereas like if you're an air traffic controller in the Air Force, easy, you go to air operations, the airport, you're good to go. So if there was kind of like this corporate ladder in your mind per se, where you're like, okay, I'm in the military, I'm in infantry. It's really not any translatable skills. I really want to do something, possibly in logistics in a warehouse because there's a huge Amazon distribution center by my house, and that's where I'm going to ETS back to. So I want to be prepared. And the military was cognitive, right? Like you're going to transition out. Here's your endpoint. Here are the career opportunities that are available within your local community, and then basically aligning you with inside of those those communities. So when you re-enter, you have a viable skill that you've trained into that you wanted that brings military experience. Because now you could be reclassed or reassigned to a logistics unit. You could learn all of the logistics software that the military uses and then transfer over. And that's what these companies like Amazon or other large shipping companies want because you have this very hard to acquire knowledge from the military. It's not like you're going to go to University of Washington or University of Washington Tacoma or Evergreen or PLU or any of these colleges and learn that discipline.
Yeah, you're doing the same thing every day for a minimum of 4 years. Sorry, 3 years with the Marines, and you're doing it every day, 365. Even when you're home, you're thinking about it because it's your life.
And then imagine you transition from that life into, hey, I just get paid a lot more, like a lot more, right? Because you go from making Burger King wages as an E5 to making good money as a supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's that transitional step for military members, and it doesn't have to be, hey, you need a right? A lot of state employers are walking away from, hey, you need these educational requirements. That's great. That opens the door for people who have been in the military for 10 years, really have no intention of using their GI Bill. They want to pass it on to their children for college. They still want to use that 10, 15, 20 years of experience that they've had in a very well-paying job that's going to match them in the military. So something for me would be, a lot of those transitional services, that we have for TAPS, but more so really aligning those career choices to what the local government, private industry needs. Maybe the last year of that soldier's transition, like, hey, where do you want to go in life, right? It's kind of the same thing that I see some active duty units doing for education. They're like, hey, you're gonna ETS in 2 years. Last year, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to go to school. So then they're like on, National Guard orders, but they're going to school and getting paid for it. Like, perfect. Because by the time that they get done with the military, they'll have a college degree and they're already lined up for a high position. And thank you for your service, right? So whereas it's just kind of like, here's your piece of paper, hang your DD-214 up on the wall, have it electronically so you can send it to your employer and to
you. I see. That I've never thought about it in that way. That would make things so much more simple for a lot of people because knowing how to set up a LinkedIn and setting one up doesn't necessarily mean you have a smooth transition. Yeah, if finance is a huge issue that a lot of veterans face when they leave active duty, maybe, but that depends on the person. For me, I knew what job I had our job already secured, and I was working my way into a career. But it wasn't necessarily what I needed. I needed to deal with the fact that I had friends commit suicide when we were deployed, and friends, go through the whole issue of not knowing who they were or their purpose, and saying, you know what, the world would be a lot better without me, and just disappearing or being on the edge, or having people have cabin fever, dealing with loss while deployed, having to tell and facilitate people who had lost their brother or their sister, but they weren't immediate family, quote unquote, as far as the military is concerned. And I have to deal with the sailor who's grieving through loss. And I just told them their brother died because they didn't get an AMCROSS message because it wasn't a big deal or whatever. There's a lot of different traumatic experiences that we can all face. And it's not the same for everybody. You never win a firefight alone. You never do an unrep alone. You never come alongside a submarine and jump off with the biggest balls the world's ever seen onto a drug sub in the Coast Guard, apparently. Shout out to Coast Guard. And then beat on the door saying open up in Spanish. That doesn't really just happen. And then you have a smooth transition. I mean, I would feel pretty good about that, honestly, if that was me. But the rest, we never know what he went through.
We should do a podcast on like where that guy is in 10 years from.
You know what? I'm gonna do some research and try to figure out where he is, because I'll tell you what, he's got a job somewhere set up.
He's got a job somewhere.
He's got a job somewhere, man. If I retire with them, but Honestly, he probably will. That was awesome. That was an awesome experience. He threw caution to the wind, and I love when people do that. Random acts of bravery of going outside the box is what I live for. But I really love your take on that because there's so many different individuals in the military who have different experiences. Not everybody has the same walk. We see in Hollywood, we see the lone survivors. And I've met somebody who is directly affected by Operation Red Wings. You know, Danny Deet's one of his best friends. I served with him. I can't name his name because he's in DevGru. But holy shit, that's one of my heroes. Knowing what he went through, transitioning into the from the green water navy to the blue water navy, it was not good. He was going stir crazy. Lord only knows what it's like to be a part of an elite unit and then to chart a map and a course on a map on an aircraft carrier that's sitting in the shipyard because of a literally a technical difficulty for a month. Like I go stir crazy. I can't imagine that, but I know that different sailors have a lot of different issues in the United States Navy. I can't speak on the Army or the Air Force, Coast Guard, Space Force, and Marines, of course. I really can't speak on these issues, but all I can do is ask. What is something that you experienced with the Army that is a key component of who you are today? Because every branch and every person in it has their own experiences. What is one thing that you love that you can bring and articulate to the United States as itself in the civilian sector now that you've finished time in the Army?
Now, you ever been to an orderly room before?
No.
In the army, we call it an orderly room, right? It's just basically like it's like the talk or like
Yes.
your platoon like area of operation. It's like the central point where the radio is, and there's some schmuck who gets tasked to sit by the radio for the talk to call them for some stupid bullshit, right?
Oh yeah.
I miss the orderly room, and I think that was a huge driver for a lot of the things in my life. Some may or may not know this. When I was released from incarceration in 2014 or 15, I'm sorry, I started at Tacoma Community. I had an automotive degree and thought the next best thing was be an automotive engineer, and wasn't too good at it. So I had to rearrange a whole bunch of things. Uh, but during that time, um, it, I remember walking into the Veteran Center, and there's this old crusty Air Force vet, Frank McDougal, who I'm super appreciative to. We'd always just go in there and chop it up with a couple of the work studies right before class, and we did that, while I was in a very low point in my life, and I needed it. I was like living in the parking lot of Tacoma Community College, dodging the public safety officers, which my ladies worked there for years now, and showering in the gym when it opens super early in the morning so I could make class. And where I'm going with this is when I started the Veterans Organization, the TCC, there was one story that an instructor told me, and it was I had started the Veterans Organization. People were coming in, and everyone would just kind of stop by for before their classes and get really loud. And financial aid would complain, "Hey, you gotta tone it down. There's a lot of F words coming out of there. It's not PC." But we had a whole bunch of veterans who were just clicking and talking and happy about life and its education. And the Veterans Organization really came because this chemistry teacher told me, "Hey, man, it's really great you started this vet organization." I had this student, and this was like a week after I started the organization. Uh, had this student who was on his phone, veteran, texting away like he shouldn't have in the back of the class, and he just fucking flipped out. He cleared all of his books off of the table, including the partner next to him, and picked up his backpack and walked out. And he goes, I wish the college would do more like veteran sensitive training because I had received it once. It was like a 15-minute training, and I just tried to refocus everything back onto the board for the class because I didn't know what to do, but I knew just to kind of lead that veteran do it. Well, I sat there and that was like everyone, that's a whoa type of story, and you can picture it in your head. And I sat there and I was like, I've been that guy though. Where did he go? Like for real, where did he go? Because two things are going to happen. Either you're going to go back out to your car, get in it, drive through traffic in midday when there's like moms taking their kids to McDonald's for a Happy Meal or grandma's going back for their physical therapy appointment, whatever it may be, right? Like not normal people because most of us working are like in a business office somewhere. And he's racing through traffic to get home to go self-medicate. Or two, which is what I found out what really happened, was the veteran went out to his car, grabbed a firearm, and was going to commit suicide in the middle of the parking lot because he had had the exact same experience with his significant other that I had. I said, man, this is the whole reason that we need to have a safe space on campus that veterans can come in and literally that guy could storm out of class and start screaming, kicking, throwing shit around, and start cussing. Everybody in the office is going to start chopping it up and laughing because why? We all been veterans. We all had that orderly room. We're like, man, fuck first sergeant. He had me do this, and I'm now tasked on KP duty for the next week or whatever it may be, right? Like you were there with your guys. And for me, that transition, that peer support, which I think you see blooming in a lot of things from, I was wonderful enough to have Jason Jarman, Tacoma Community College in the very infancy of it before I ran through the UW. To have him at MVP because these are the same type of like quarterly meetings, right? Environment that I see. Like I know when I'm sitting there swinging those ropes, and I forget the trainer that's there. He's a beast, right? His arms are like the size
Like
of
an
my
Aaron. God.
Aaron. Dude is a beast, right?
He's
I'm
a
sitting
he's
there.
a monster of a human being. I tell you what, I've never seen anybody that large and physically fit, but he's so intelligent as well. It's
Yeah.
really a conundrum.
And you can sit there and then you can embrace the suck with him, right? You can laugh and be like, man, this sucks. And you can sit there and laugh and just keep going. And that's the orderly room portion that I miss about the military that really ingrained into me is like you embrace the suck, man. Like it's better than being out in the desert alone in the middle of the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean, just chilling at nothing, looking at the same people doing the same thing, right? It's not any different on the sand, except maybe the color of cars that drive past you, or maybe the color burqa that rolls past you. Other than that, you're doing the same thing. And I think just being able to be that non-political person with other vets and just take it back to the non-PC area that vets live. For me, that's the best area because that's where you get the real realness. You get a lot of people's emotions, and you really see who the people, right?
Hell yeah, brother. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel that same thing you're talking about. Every time I'm around a group of people who have served in the military, it's a weird, uncommon bond. There's this weird fire that burns a different shade than most um in veterans because they all sign that. We all signed the same line that said, you know what? So I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Blah blah blah. We all different said different Navy creeds or sailor creeds and this is this Army Corps value, whatever. We all had different war songs, and I don't even who would sing before war, not me. Whatever, right? We all have different creeds that we live by in the United States military. But the thing that unites us all is that we all signed up to support and defend the Constitution. We all signed up for our neighbor who doesn't like the same president, who didn't vote the same way, who didn't look anything like me, who he might smoke weed and I don't, or I smoke weed and he does, whatever. And that is what separates us from the rest of the world, I would say. I don't like to put people in boxes. I hate boxes. But if we're to be honest, that's a special box that's checked right there. And when we're around each other, man, happiness, camaraderie, love, family. I'm tighter with a lot of the people that were in the military that I didn't even serve with than most of my family. And that is huge.
Yes.
That's huge. That's what I needed when I was a kid. That
Well,
group.
and it falls to our fundamental constitutional right? Freedom of speech. And that means to be able to sit there and sometimes be non-politically correct and to joke around and to make basically bar talk, right? But at the same time, you can take it back to a common thread and a common value, and that's where the military just has it, right? There isn't a activity in civilian life where you're doing this, except when there's maybe alcohol or drugs, maybe faith, right? Maybe faith would be the closest thing to that
Mhm.
religious component that you can bring from the military.
I 100% agree, brother. We have this beautiful culture that we create in the military. I wouldn't say it's a normal culture because what's the number one root word in culture? Cult. It's not we're not some Amway project or something like that. But we do have so many different things that we create that are positive for us. We love the American flag. Or sometimes we see people we don't like in it, and that's okay. We have different things that drive us and inspire us to be great or inspire us to not care about this because it's not important compared to the whole situation. Being able to step back and observe everything has been one of my biggest strengths that I've gained from the military. I love being able to look at it like that, and the camaraderie is unparalleled in this universe.
Wonderful. Shots, brother. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
brother. 100% to those who we lost.
Speaking on that, well, that's a little spicy for me. Speaking on that, when we lose people uh, in the army, I've only had one go at this, so others may be well more versed. And I
Okay.
know the 9/11 war series, we've lost a significant amount of soldiers. I think the last count was almost 2,300-ish, and countless others to veteran suicide. I know we can all attest that I've probably been to more funerals for suicide than I have for active combat. And that's really sad. People are listening on a podcast. I'm wearing a shirt that says, "Do not give in to the war within in veteran suicide."
Hmm.
But one of the most standout memories I have is for Sergeant Jeffrey Shaver, May 14th, 2014, Central Baghdad, Iraq. I was literally on the radios. I worked in the Tactical Operations Command Center. I was taking off high speed at 18 and was really good with computers. Um, and I basically monitored the S3, which is battle operations. So whenever Sergeant Major would need to go out on a raid, I was there. Whenever Sergeant Major wanted to command and control with inside of the Tactical Operations Command Center, whether it be mobile, 113, or a Bradley in a static location, we always had Blue Force Tracker up, which is basically like a GPS system for your car, only it displays on a map, which is like a satellite image, and it updates in real time so you can see where your forces are. They start making contact. You can start planning from a high level how to extract them out in the most efficient. And I remember sitting there late, we had like CNN or something on the TV, back in 03, 04, and they get a radio. Shaver hit Shaver. And I just remember looking at my street, who was an officer at the time, and going, "We have contact, and we have a friendly down." And the look in his eyes as he went to go wake up Lieutenant. And all I remember is this frenzy. I was basically had like two radios on each side. I was calling up to Brigade on one, and talking to the guys on the battalion, and had heard that there was a sniper and that one of our guys was down, and it was one of our medics. And everyone gets hyped up. We're in the talk. We got extractions going on. We're calling in birds. We're calling in overwatches, making sure that we can get our guys out because it was a pretty serious situation in the middle of the night. Didn't really have quick reaction forces to spun up to really go drop in on them like we normally would. Have a bird sitting in the middle of our base just spinning all day, just waiting. And at this time we didn't. And I'll never forget the team coming in to the commander. And I might preference this a little like The Last Samurai, but literally in my mind, our commander, Lieutenant Colonel Fowler, at the time, who was the Seattle police chief. I forget the platoon sergeant that walked in, but basically walked in and, not on one knee, but handed, in my mind, it was basically him coming up to the Emperor and presenting Sergeant Shaver's helmet. And the lieutenant colonel turned around and he looked at us and he held Shaver's helmet and he said, this is proof. I want soldiers to see this as all the other commanders are standing around. Our helmets aren't bulletproof. Our vests aren't bulletproof. They're bullet resistant. And this is what happens to soldiers. This is real. And it was the first loss of our battalion. And it was sitting there, that helmet sat in the middle of the top as a reminder to people who came in, that were leaving the fob that death is real. It's right here. It's right on us, right? And we had many more episodes after that. But the commander and all the officers, right? The people who I literally held the most respect for my entire life. The most educated people in my life in the military were standing around in a circle holding his helmet, just absolutely unable to do anything for the soldiers around them, to comfort them, to think about the families back home and how we would rectify out like dropping the marble in the middle of the pool, how many waves it was going to create. And I just remember the next morning waking up, trying to go to the phone traders, call my girlfriend. I was like super happy. I hadn't talked to her in a couple of days. Blackout, communication blackout for like a good week and a half. People, bitching, complaining. A lot of guys in here that Shaver had died yet. And being the person who, was in the top hearing this information up front, it wasn't like I could just go tell them. It had to come down through their chain. But it was a very interesting time, right? Because a couple days later, we had a funeral, 21 gun salute. We all stood up and said wonderful things about him, and traded contact information to get a hold of his family and get the people that were closest to him at the time of death to be able to, talk to his family after the communication ban was lifted. And that to me was really, really powerful, right? Like, here you are wanting to grieve, wanting to tell the community. I mean, we're National Guardsmen. It's a very tight knit community. Like, we're all from Washington. Right? This isn't like the U.S. Army and someone's from New York, someone's from Florida, and someone's from California, and we're all in this unit. Like, we're like Jolly, Spokane, and Tri Cities, and Bellingham, and we all know each other, right? So it was a very wild awakening as an 18-year-old kid, and this was my first traumatic experience of death, and I was the radio operator there, and just the waves in which the Army just kind of shut everything down to not only offer support to their soldiers, but like, hey man, we got to reach back out for the family. Like, it's not just here. Like, we have lives over at home, and I think when you're in combat, a lot of times you just switch off that there's that whole world there until it's safe to do so. And when you lose a friend like this, I don't think you ever switch back into it being safe. But everything is on all the time.
Wow, man. Well, I wanted to say first, of course, sorry for your loss, man. There's no words that can really say what I want to say, but I'm sorry that you for that loss, man. There's nothing more important than trying to make it home with everybody. You know, these aren't just statistics or numbers that Congress looks over on their pieces of paper while they're getting paid $200,000-$300,000 or whatever. They're human beings. Their fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, cousins, aunties, a random person who lives up the street who doesn't talk to very many people. They're human beings. And
yeah, these were guys that like we would strap to a gurney, right? With like duct tape and carry them around the fob. Like, these were friends that you'd take a shot with. These are people that you'd go out and get shot at with. Crawl back in the vehicle and start laughing about it as you wrap up an MRE. Like, these were brothers and sisters.
yeah, there's no bonds. I don't think there's any bonds like the ones that are forged in combat. Violence is to the civilian world over here because we don't have a draft or conscription or some of these other terrifying and horrible things that other countries do have that are currently being used all the time. We don't have those. There's no mandatory servitude to the country in its military here in America, which is amazing because I wouldn't wish that on anybody. I wouldn't wish it on a single person.
I mean,
And
look at Ukraine that we have going on right now, right? Like, imagine Canada invading us and then everyone and your mom just getting a gun and trying to hold it together. Like, it seems, even as someone who's been in combat, like there's no way how that would work, right? Like, so we have to be blessed for the systems that we have in place. Because you're right, because some people just aren't made for combat. Like, I wasn't made for combat. I remember the very first engagement. I remember hiding behind a Humvee tire, like curled up in a ball. So I was like this, wannabe gangster guy, and like, here we go, first firefight. Oh no, this isn't for me. Second,
and
third,
I
fourth,
hope
fifth
no
firefight.
one should ever shame you for that, man. I appreciate your transparency, first of all, and no one
Yeah,
should ever shame you for that.
and I mean, a lot of people. That's how it is. Like, you got bullets flying above you. You don't want to. This isn't some Rambo movie. It ain't no reset button, right? But the third, fourth, fifth, sixth engagement, like, man, you start firing back. You start seeing where the bullets are coming from. You start getting tactical, and then it becomes second nature. And then you start to get into the, hey, it's almost too familiar, and Saving Private Ryan moments start popping up where you're running through gunfire to make other suppressive flanks or fires on the enemy. And I mean, but those bonds, those are forged only in the military, only with people that you're under those traumatic incidents with.
I think the closest thing that we're ever going to see in what you just talked about is during the movie Fury. I watched it recently, and for the first instance, the new guy to the squad didn't shoot for the first time, and he got shit on for it by everybody else. And then he started to get in the groove, and it's an unfortunate hardening that has to happen. And it's as unfortunate as it is. I'm trying to not dribble my words and say it in an inappropriate way, but I'm just going to say it how it is. It's an unfortunate, necessary thing for human beings to do violence on behalf of others in our current day and age. And I hope that in the future we can get rid of this war thing. It would be really nice. But we still need to have warriors. We still do. Because there's people who can't they can't conform or can't get it done or can't do it. And for them, it would be shock and awe. It would be devastation. It would be liability. It would be death, more death. I'm thankful for the people who sign up every single day. I'm thankful for you, brother, and for every person who served before me and after me for signing up and to go. It makes a huge difference because it's not my wife's little brother. He has a dream to be a famous YouTuber and a police officer and help his community and to be a part of a SWAT team. He practices every day understanding when not to shoot people versus when to shoot people, right? He's got his head in the right place. He meets with the Linwood Police Department at all their outings. He tries. He can have those dreams because of our veterans and our active duty personnel right now. And I think we sometimes forget that. One thing I want to touch on is the importance of how you got across something you said. Here in America, we get to party, we get to hit the club, take shots. Yeah, let's turn up, ooh, whatever. That's great. Taking shots and taking shots are two different things. The gravity that surrounds the statement taking a shot can be traumatic, literally traumatic for somebody who's been in a firefight with I'm not going to ever name his name. My brother unfortunately the Taliban in Afghanistan, I believe, he said they sent out a village of people, and as they got closer and started shooting, when they got to the corpses, a lot of them were kids. Like 99.5%, probably 100% were kids. And he had a difficult time being around his own kids because he was literally terrified that they were going to grab AK-47s and RPGs and shoot at them with the PKMs, whatever. That is just a smidgen of the worst that has happened to human beings. Every human being, our experiences are so different, and not everybody's invincible. Not everybody's impervious to being penetrated by traumatic experiences. And I really appreciate you sharing a story about what happened to your brother, man. Loss is never easy. And I hate to talk about it like it is, because it isn't. Something you brought up that really stood out to me is PTSD and its involvement with suicidal ideations and suicidal actions following those ideations if left untreated or unsupported by friends, because I have friends who've been walked off the ledge by friends. I've been blessed with the pleasure of helping other friends walk off the ledge of suicide. I've not traded. I don't give a shit if I left work. I'm so thankful to be able to do it. One thing I want to put out to the world: there were 519 suicides from veterans in 2021. They haven't released 2022 yet, but over 24 of my friends were, 23 exactly of my friends who committed suicide in 2022 were veterans. One was not, and I cleaned up his apartment. I want to say to anybody listening who is going through a tough time, you feel like you can't make it all the way up the hill. It's heavy, weighing heavy on your shoulder. You're tired of the fight. Find something to fight for. And the best way to do it is to look in the mirror, because you are worth it. You have a place on this earth. There's nothing you have done that you can't come back from. Your life has value. There are people who literally go overseas and would give everything just for you to spend one more day here, because you're worth that much.
Yeah, and I'd also say find someone to fight with, right?
Yes,
Like
brother.
we always talk about this. You don't fight a war alone, and that's something where, myself, I've had an episode with suicide, right? And it was during this domestic violence incident where I was just like, man, I just assaulted these people. I know the next step. Like, I'm not stupid. I know law enforcement's coming. Like, I'm not going to be labeled as this person, right? And I couldn't fight that fight alone. Like, I had a friend who learned about, everything that was going on the next morning after all of this went down in my life, and drove 13 hours across 2 states to come just be with me for a week, right? To
Wow.
not take away my guns, but make sure like I was going to be okay with myself. And obviously, there's a fear there as a veteran. I mean, a lot of us got guns. I mean, like Dr. Dre. I came home from war, got a whole bunch of guns, and 10 years later, what do you think I got rid of them? Like, I still got them in the safe. I'm very proficient
It's a
with it,
beautiful reference, by the way.
right? So, violence is not that far away given your MOS, and I think suicide is just something, we talk about it now because it's something that's like a tagline almost. 22 a day. That's it's nothing I'm proud of. It's nothing you're proud of. It's nothing anyone's proud of. But at the same time, when there's not resources available to fight together, right, to connect, to show up to MVP, to be accountable, to do community service projects with Travis Manion Foundation or the Michigan Team, Student Veterans of America, or we got hundreds of them, right? Go on a fishing trip, join a RBW. Um, don't fight it alone. There's so many people that are willing to jump in front of a bus for you and be like, hey, man, I've been there, right? Best analogy I can give someone is not if they're in a foxhole, is not to walk by and tell them the position that they're in, is to jump down in there and be like, hey, I know how to get out. Here's the map. Let's go. Right? Fight it together.
I love that, brother. I absolutely love that. One thing I want to touch on and say that you know, also with what you just said, I think it's important to point out that I heard this from a clinical psychiatrist just the other week. 9 times out of 10, so that's 90%. It's not the best, not a bulletproof number. It's bullet resistant number though. 90% of the time, 9 times out of 10, if you can make it through the first time dealing with suicidal ideations where you have that gun in your hand or those pills in your hand or that bottle and you're thinking about freaking, oh God, I'm gonna find a building and jump off it, or I'm gonna run out in front of a street or whatever suicidal ideations it's and you're contemplating suicide. If you can make it to that just that first time, you can make it the rest with help, with friends. You don't need to say, "Hey, I'm broken," because you're not. Maybe you're just a little bent, and we're all a little bent. We've all experienced different things, and you're never alone. So anybody who is feeling that, please do contact me. I will have, of course, a list of resources below this podcast in the description of any resource I can provide. When it comes down to it, 998 or 988, excuse me. And please, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram. To all my friends, I always say, please do reach out to me. If you're listening to this and you're a friend of mine, you deploy with me, you don't even know me, please, especially if you didn't know me, that's the best person to reach out to me. Please do,
Yeah, and
because
also like if you're going through stuff, right? Like you're drunk,
yeah,
you need a ride. I tell people this all the time on Facebook. You may not have my phone number, but you got the call me now function on Facebook. Like I'll
mm,
come pick you up. It'll be an incredible talk, like the first sergeant pulling a E3 out of the brig. Like it'll be an amazing talk, but at least let's have that conversation instead of you ruin your life for making choices that end up taking you down a path you don't want to go in.
yes, DUI is a no go, man. Last a year and a couple of months ago, I lost my brother to a DUI, and so it's very very personal to me, and I wish that everybody made different choices. I try to only drink at home. I don't like drinking out and about. It's just healthy decisions, and you
Yeah.
know what? I go out a lot to not drink. If you're in a funk, just don't drink. What other recommendations do you have for people who might be feeling a little bit spun up, a little bit nervous about people walking behind them just out in town, or don't like crowded rooms? What would you say to somebody who's feeling a little bit uncomfortable about their surroundings on a regular basis?
Well, I'm definitely that guy, right? Like I'm hyper vigilant. Been into the box before. Have my firearms taken away before. So there's that huge sense of hesitancy, right? Um, that fear of not being able to protect yourself. And I would say I used to be the type of person who would carry my 40 caliber Taurus on me all times. I don't care where it was. I don't care what sign you had up, breaking the law or not, because I knew the devastating effects of a firearm around people who are unarmed. Right? It's a losing game, quickly losing game. And the biggest thing for me transitioning back was finding martial arts, and not like jujitsu, right? Because I've been trained in Brazilian jiu-jitsu and taekwondo for years, and know lots of friends. But a martial art that was more meditative and grounding, and that for me was Wing Chun. I've been doing Wing Chun for about 8 years now, and there's a meditation factor of it, right? There's a calming portion of it. There's a grounding factor of it, and it's I relate it a lot to like church, right? Like you're finding that spiritual connection, but not like a religious spiritual connection. You're like listening to yourself. You're listening to yourself breathe. You're listening to yourself maybe sometimes talk out a rhythm or a kata, right? You're basically just telling yourself it's going to be okay. And in the most pure sense, that's what a service member needs. Like a significant other is great, rubbing your head, telling you all the good things, right? Just lathering you up. But at the same time, having those positive affirmations to yourself, reaffirming, like, man, I've done great things. It's not like we sit in our living room and like, man, I'm got the flag on the wall and like, we're like bowing down to it. Looking at yourself every once in a while and just appreciating, right? Having gratitude for yourself. I think for me, putting that gratitude and them gratefulness, that's when people walk up to me. It's not this feeling that like, I need to take them on or they're going to kill me, right? Because I've learned my time is going to come, right? And if I fear that time coming, and I'm scared of that time coming, which we all are, then I don't think there's any value in my life because I'm gonna be fearful of that moment. But if I'm taken down and I can smile on that person's face and I can give them forgiveness and grace in that very moment because I know I've done everything I could possibly do in my life to be a good person, like it doesn't matter if you're Jackie Chan, it doesn't matter if you're Bruce Lee. Like eventually someone is gonna overtake you, overpower you. You can't stop that.
Always the bigger fish.
Right? So coming to that realization as a vet is like somebody could be faster on the draw than you. Somebody could have a better shot on you. Like you get somebody in the arm, they get you in the chest. Sucking chest wounds really suck, right?
Yeah, they do.
So I mean, and it doesn't matter if you get shot by a 50 caliber or 22. Like the right place is the right place. And if you're not prepared for that moment, right, you're always this hyper person. You're always this. I'm gonna fight. I'm gonna fight. For me, the living became when I just gave in. Hey man, I'm not going to be the quickest one on the gun. In my current lifestyle where I live, I'll probably be shot on I-5 just driving to go get some groceries because of the crime that persists in my community. So it's not like somebody's going to walk up behind me at a bus stop that I'm got my headphones on and I'm just chilling out rocking because that's not the type of person I am. But at the same time, do I need to be fearful when someone walks up behind me and I'm at a bus stop? No, because I'm going to fight them off eventually. But at the same time, it's not like I'm going to be standing there waiting, like, come on, let's go. Like, I'm here. And every single person that walks past me, I'm going to be this hyper aggressive person. So for me, it really came down to martial arts and just becoming more familiar with myself, having more confidence in myself to be able to just push someone back and not be the person that's going to quickly brandish a weapon or pull out a weapon to defend myself.
Hell yeah, brother. I absolutely agree. I don't think that brandishing a weapon when it's unnecessary is something that I try to avoid, and I preach that it's important to avoid. USCCA, active self-protection, police, even police activity on YouTube, sheepdog response. There's We the Female, even. I love what she does. There's so many different people who preach the same method. Know when not to pull out your gun. It's not necessary. And if we can take it a step further, like you just touched on, you're not a sentry right now. You're not on guard. This is not the sandbox. Be where your feet are, please. Is one thing I would say to my listeners and to everybody else. I'm not an expert in firearms, but I'll tell you what, after the past 3 years of studying it, I hope I know one thing. And one thing is you don't want to go to jail for something you shouldn't go to jail for. It is what it is. Like there's a lot of laws.
Somebody.
Hey, a lot of laws I don't agree with and I don't like. Let's not feed into the ones that are there for a reason. Someone pulls a gun out of me. I hope they one have a very 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 painful ending of the situation and they get arrested and taken away or whatever. Or I don't removing life is never a fun thing. But
Yeah.
but you're not a century anymore. Try to find your grace. Do you think that there's a direct correlation between fitness, self-awareness, and dealing with our post-military differences and situations?
Me, not really. Like for me, I really think veterans have expectations that are
Mm.
sometimes unobtainable, right? Like I'm always going to be in peak fitness. Man, I look back at 18-year-old me and 38-year-old me. There's a difference, right? Dad body's in full effect. But it still doesn't mean that I can't get out there and protect myself or run around with my son or my need to. But I'm not parkouring off walls when I'm 16 and 60 pounds of gear, right? Like it's just not me. Um, do I think physical activity has some motivation on your well-being? Absolutely. More so, I think the accountability, right? We see this. I see this a lot in friends who own gyms or professional trainers, just showing up, right? Like a job. You've got to just show up. And I think just showing up suppresses a lot of the demons that, right? Because PT was a large portion of a lot of lives. And to just remove it and insert alcohol or marijuana or cocaine or uh, pornography, whatever you're into, right? Like there is substances everywhere and vices everywhere to front upon. And if you're not being motivated by healthy intentions, being positive or intentional about your activity, it's not like you need to show up every single week or twice a week to MVP, but hey, show up once a month, show up twice a month, do a martial art, ride a bike, go up to the mountain on the weekend, walk around, like maintain the physical level of activity that you would have in the military to a certain point. Because I think there's a lot of mental health suppressions that come in with anxiety and PTSD when you're sitting there focusing and doing positive things for yourself. It kind of leads back to that positive affirmation. There's not a direct correlation in my mind, but yeah, being active and being, positive and contributing to your life rather than just smoking weed and sitting on the couch is definitely a better impact on how you perceive your life and the expectations in which you expect, because you're not going to come home after 20 years and be this decorated war hero and go make $150,000 a year to start. Not going to happen. Sorry, Major. Sorry. And I think a lot of people have that expectation that because they were successful in the military, they're going to be successful in the world, and that's just not the case, right? So finding that happiness and where your happiness really is, I think that's the direct correlation that people should look at.
Excellent, man. Well, there's so many things that can be said about the stigmas that surround the vets and surround our active duty soldiers, sailors, Marines, Air Force, whatever they are, the fly hires or the airmen, as what I'm gonna say. I might be wrong, but I'm gonna call them fly hires. Okay, the fly hires, because that's what they say, aim higher or something like that. And then the Coast Guardians, of course. I love the Coast Guard so much. No, I don't. I love the Navy. Anyways, there's something that has to be said about the camaraderie that we all share. The thing that branches all of us together. What Before we get into my next topic, what is one thing that you see that is exactly the same across all branches? Because I made a messed up bullshit joke, and I don't want to throw salt in anybody's wounds. But what is something that's the same across the board, like
I
other
think
than the uniform?
I think everyone hates the Marines equally. I mean, just I think between the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, the Coast Guard, the Space Force. Have we even mentioned the Space Force? Maybe
I
this is
mentioned him once
okay.
on this
Second
one.
shout
I've
out.
mentioned them twice on a different podcast. Yeah, I give them their credit. I don't even know. I think it's a funny, awesome, hilarious idea. I love their uniforms. It look like something out of Spaceballs.
I just wish that I would have been smarter. That's all. I have nothing else against them except I wish I would have picked a different branch because they definitely feel like they got it more figured out than. Yeah, I would say that's the common thread across all branches is we just have the spirit, decor, right? We are here for our country. We all serve the same flag. It doesn't matter. I remember being over in Iraq and seeing guys from Australia, Netherlands, right? And they'd roll up in their little like tiny smushed box with an armored turret on it, and we're like, oh man, there's Japan, right? But when you saw another American, like it didn't matter what unit you were from, didn't matter what it was, you were Americans, right? And you fought for the exact same cause. So although we make fun of it stateside and Garrison a lot, that it doesn't.
Hell yeah, man. I love that. I remember I was just listening to, I think it was this, I can't remember whether it was the 13th or 14th chapter. It's one of the chapters in Tim Kennedy's book, Scars and Stripes. I was listening to him talk about the Czechoslovakians, is how I think I'm pronouncing them properly. I love their fast and hard hitting mentality. I love it for their special operations group. I think it's absolutely outstanding. And I think that we can work great with other nations. But there's something about that American flag that just encompasses everything that I need in my life. When I see the American flag, personally, I think about my neighbor up the street who's a Vietnam vet who signed up when his friend was drafted. He wanted to sign up too because he felt that he could serve a higher purpose going to war in Vietnam. And his wife, who's an Air Force vet, and his son, who couldn't join the military because of physical genetic issues, going through some shit, but he loves his first responders, supports his military, and would do anything to show his dad his appreciation for his service. I think about my neighbor next door who absolutely is terrified of guns and would never want to even look at one, but knows that she has a neighbor who she can send her kids to. I think about my neighbor next door who hates the fact that we had this president or that president in office, but can always have a conversation with me about life and being better and achieving a different level of success that doesn't involve fantasizing and obsessing over Fox or CNN. I think about all these people, and that flag is for all of them. It's for my gay neighbor down the street that shoots guns and drinks Black Rifle Coffee Company tea. It's for everybody. It's for everybody. There's no one excluded. That red, white, and blue. It's special because people sign up every day to say, hey, when you see this fucking flag, it represents freedom, democracy, the ability to have these discussions we're having right now, talking about what we don't like about the military and the transition, or how to help other people. That is special. And you know what? I love that when I see that flag and I hear the national anthem, I still get tears in my eyes. It is what it is. I ain't gonna change. Can't change me. But I love the American flag. What do you feel that it represents to you?
For me, it's country, right? And um, some people may see this differently, and I completely understand your position. But wars are fought for land. The only way you win a war is by holding land. That's something that's ingrained in every infantryman is you hold that land until your final breath, because that is what wins a war is holding land. And I'm so blessed to have been on this soil, born on this soil, and had my family members and others bleed for this soil to call it their own. My family, fled in the early 1900s for Mussolini and Nazism that flourished with inside of Europe. We started from a secondhand grocery shopping cart selling used fruit. Now imagine that, used fruit, as a business, to growing to the largest fruit production company in the entire United States ever. Um, we were immigrants off of boats. We were WAPs, right? We came over as stowaways without paper. We were redlined into certain communities, and that's why you see like little Italies and things like that. We grew from that freedom, right? Is imperfect as our republic is. We were able to grow from this land based on the sacrifices that every person has given, not just Italians, Asian Americans. Um, we have all valued, we have all bled. And for me, the flag just means it's you, it's me, right? When I was ramping up for the army, it's like, oh, there's some beautiful woman that's waiting for you when you get home. No, it's actually my little 6-year-old brother who wants to play Army, right? It's actually the kid across the street who sees a fire truck or hears a fire truck and runs outside to see it, right? There's a cementing of our country. There's a foundation in which we all live in that I just give that grace to.
Wow. Wow, brother. I love the way you put that. God, I got chills thinking about it. Because I was that kid who hears fire trucks running up 150th Street in Linwood, Washington, and oh, am I gonna see? Oh no, I missed it. Damn. I
Or
didn't tell
maybe
my
get a
parents. I said,
sticker
"Dang."
or a plastic hat or something, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
there was this national pride that we
I don't think it's really scary because I watch videos surrounding 9/11, and there's something that really sticks out to me. That was the last time the country has been unanimously, almost. I mean, there was a couple of people who were like, "Oh, it was planned" or whatever. There was a unanimously. There were flags everywhere. Having a baseball game in New York after 9/11 was huge. I watched that baseball game while my stepdad was deploying. I cried over my little sister while she cried because she missed her daddy because he was deploying. He got activated out of the reserves. He went. He didn't even fucking put up a fight. For all I know, I don't think he'll ever tell me, but I'm pretty sure he signed up when it happened. He lost friends, came home screaming in his sleep. He paid his price. 26 years in the Air Force, great human being. Always reminds me of the fact that not all people in the Air Force are sitting in a chair 24/7. He put in work, and he is one of my major role models. I just want to give a shout out to Tech Sergeant William Wallace. Thank you so much for everything and for taking the mantle when my own father, dropped it. So thank you so much. But that lo and behold, the I don't think we'll ever see the camaraderie that we had as a country, like countrywide, since 9/11, with division in the media and all these things that they try to put us in boxes and separate us. I think that I saw so much beauty and strength in a moment of hurt for our country when 9/11 happened. What do you think about it?
I think we do it all the time. I just think it's not number one politicized, and I don't think it's is in your face. Um, I think one event that when I was student veteran president at UW Tacoma that I thought really didn't get any traction when we were really trying to promote it was the Christtown church shootings in New Zealand, where people were massacred, and there was a video of it. Imagine as a family member, you're watching the beheading of your loved one. It's not that graphic, but it is that graphic and extreme if you've ever watched those videos of the Christtown shootings. And I think our country comes together with inside of immigrant populations all the time. I know here in University Place, we held a candlelight vigil and had the chief of police, the congressman, anybody and everybody you could see out there. And I remember seeing students from Tacoma Community College, in which I'd been friends with, right, in classes. And we really didn't have any interaction, but this one tragedy pulled the entire community together in a synagogue, and we were able to share these experiences. And these experiences are completely different than the normal experiences, right? With inside of a mosque, there's a place for men, there's a place for women. The place for women is behind a door. And when you see those doors open and you see community just packed with inside a synagogue celebrating the life and denouncing the violence and the pain that has been caused a continent away, right? Like we do this all the time as Americans. We do it for the Pulse Night shootings. We do it for the most recent killings of an African American on February 1st, first day for Black History Month. We're burying the Black community is burying one. I think some areas are politicized. I think others are wildly represented properly. But I think that we have this sense of 9/12, right? That every veteran probably fought for in their time in Iraq, where our country comes together. But we don't see it unified as the president standing on top of a pile with a bullhorn, making us all proud, right? Giving us goosebumps and pulling us through those really dark times. what we see now is this insensitive trust in our government, because a lot of us have been tired of being lied to, right? A lot of us have seen the higher level reports and information. It doesn't really match. I think that there's a sense of trust that has always existed in America, but lately has been trampled on, of the sense of community. We just don't talk about it as much as we should. And we need to get back to sharing those feelings, feeling those pains with each other, because it's not just the Black community, right? As I talk about something that's very recent in our face right now, it's not just the Black community. Here I am with a racially diverse family of my own, and I feel that pain. And how can I elevate this pain and talk about the differences in which we have as a country as if we're in 9/12? How can we celebrate the good and the bad?
Absolutely, brother. And we don't necessarily need Katniss Everdeen from District 12 standing on a rubble that's been burned down saying, I'm Katniss Everdeen. This is District 12. Look at what President Snow did. We don't necessarily need that acting, or we don't need a Fabergé egg to say that we're sophisticated. All we need to be truly sophisticated as a society is to care about another human being next to us. And I think we can all do better at that. There's one thing that I really wanted to talk about when it comes to caring about other human beings, and I think you do a phenomenal job about it. We've talked about it offline, and it's something that I'm really passionate about myself. I am not a superstar. I can't just abandon my job and go into, veteran outreach and veteran service organizations and help other people. But I can do my best with this platform that I spent. This is like my overtime for me. So after I get off work, I come here and I do this podcast. And I'm blessed enough to sit with you and talk about something that is very passionate and very near and dear to your heart. So please help me understand first of all, let's lay the foundation. What is a veteran service organization? What do they do? What services are there out there? And what could be different? What could be better? Please give me a tell all, brother.
Yeah. So nonprofits, just as the historical context, is out there as a government tax credit from the community. Think of a community owning a nonprofit. So when someone says it's their nonprofit, laugh, because any nonprofit that you see is actually because of the community supporting that organization to give them a tax break and a tax write-off. It also gives benefits to people that want to donate money. They can write it off on their taxes. Usually benefits more wealthy people than it does lower income people. So there's a tax benefit. But historically, what nonprofits really do and reach for veterans is fill a gap that the Veterans Administration or the U.S. military is not providing for its people. One of those things for myself that I came up through was Student Veterans of America, and hearing the successes of World War II veterans and the GI Bill creation and how it's impacted generational change throughout veterans' lives. So I can't speak highly enough about Student Veterans of America and how they've grown within the last 14 years plus, 15 years plus. Um, but also nonprofit organizations that do more immediate things that aren't so compartmentalized with inside of education. I've had the privilege of serving within Lifeline Veteran Services, which was a very small veterans organization at the time. Basically just did the resource fair at the Tacoma Dome and would have up to 5,000 at risk or homeless individuals who would show up to this event, and we would just fit them with sleeping bags, backpacks, things that they would need to continue their homeless journey, unfortunately, because the systems are overwhelmed. The community services, Tacoma Rescue Mission can do so much. 6 out of the 9 emergency support systems that are within Pierce County reside in Tacoma proper. So there's a lot of work that we can do, but nonprofits exist, and a plethora of nonprofits exist to kind of fill that gap. My time at Lifeline, we had a wonderful crew and a board. We were able to go through a state acquisition and basically pick up a failing nonprofit that had been in the community for 3 decades over some pretty shady things. Able to stabilize those veteran secure housing employment contracts, other things like that. But there's also other organizations that I've just been a part of that have really made a huge impact in my life, and not really so much like quote unquote changing people's lives. And those are the ones that really were the binders. I talked about this with Amy Timir on Wednesday. I was on her podcast, and there's a there's kind of a functional disconnect with a lot of nonprofits in that there's not a value, right? Like people when they show up with a problem, it's already like a garbage dump fire, right? It's like bring all the fire extinguishers out and help me. To whereas this peer support component of like the Mission Continues, Travis Manu Foundation, MVP, these are like community nonprofits that really are the binding, the glue that connect people back together and kind of keep them in that accountable mindset, right? I kind of feel like these services exist to catch veterans when they want help, right? Like you can always come out and do a community service project with the Mission Continues, but it's not like something someone's going to actively search for, like community service project for me in Google, right? Like you probably Google something you see on TV long before you Google a community service project. But picking out blackberry bushes at a park or laying down bark or building a fence, it may seem like kind of boring and monotonous. Some people it's kind of exciting. But as a parent, I drive past the park like that. One that I've always contributed time to is McKinley Park, right across the street from the Tacoma Dome. I can drive past there with my kids, and my kids are like, "I built the fence there, spread the bark." I pulled blackberries from them, right? So although I'm like giving back, with there's this overarching umbrella. There's this whole thing that the military designed to us for 9/11, and that's changing hearts and minds. And it wasn't changing hearts and minds of people who are 30 plus. It was changing hearts and minds of all those 30 below, right? So those kids. So showing them that community service has a valuable and that veterans struggle and have transitional issues the same way that formerly incarcerated people have transitional issues, right? And that there's nonprofits there to bridge these gaps because the government or private industry really aren't plugging those holes. And in that sense, that's the most wonderful thing about nonprofit is that you're literally picking up a deficiency and running forward with it. There's no permission that you need from anyone. Just the community says, hey, look, if it's going to be successful and there's a need there, we'll continue to use these tax breaks. And that's the wonderful thing that I think about veteran service organizations. There's so many of them out there, is that they plug in these specific holes, right? Like the VA doesn't offer you to go fishing and go catch salmon. But there's many organizations out there that'll take you out on the water, offer you this opportunity, or MVP. You could be highly disabled. There's a member that's there in a wheelchair, and they will still functionally need your support, ability, looking. And those are the wonderful things that nonprofits can provide outside of the government. Just government would really kind of suck at doing. Who would want to go to the VA to go? Not me.
Not me. I know that. Yes, Lord. Absolutely. Well, wow. Thank you for the explanation, man. It's hard to kind of to articulate the differences between veteran service organizations and the different components that contribute to them. A lot of different things: MVP, Line, TMF. There's the mission continues. There's so many different avenues out there in this small region: Washington State, the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Idaho. All of them, all of us. There's so many different, but there are over 1 million veterans in this region. There's something that I love that something you mentioned, Josh Wielden, is we're working with Pacific Northwest PNW vets, the Facebook group, and connecting people so that we can find these resources. And I just want to give a shout out to him real quick. I love what you do, brother. Thank you so much for connecting all of us. It's never easy, man, to sit here and transition out alone. I wish I had friends. I wish I had you in my life when I was transitioning, so I could be like, man, I don't know how to be a normal human being. I'm kind of freaking out. They want me to like not punch somebody in the face who's trying to like attack me drunk as shit in midnight at 13 Coins in Bellevue. Like, what do I do? I've worked 70 hours this week. I'm tired. They pay me minimum wage. What do I do? Do I find a new job? You probably say, yeah, I'd probably find a new job. Maybe just move on. You might not fit in well beating the shit out of a rich person in Bellevue, right? But hey, man, I'm my heart's warm, and it's also broken at hearing that there are so many organizations out there because of the people aren't connected. People don't know these things. I was very, very blessed with the opportunity just recently to go to a Starbucks middle of work. I'm working at University Station in on Sound Transit line. Oh fuck! I just told. It is what it is. Oh well, don't sue me, please, y'all. I walked up and down University Station, the Starbucks right there at Third and Seneca, and there was a vet. He was like, "Hey man, I like your American flag, patch on your shoulders." Like, yeah, yeah, thanks, man, I appreciate it. You in the military? Yeah. He was. There was no doubt in my mind that this individual was homeless, and he just had a normal conversation with me. I said, "Hey man, I'm connected with quite a few resources. I'd love to get you in contact with them. Like, what? How was your transition out of the military?" He was like, "It's been 10 years, bro, and I still don't have a roof over my head." 4 phone calls. He moved in last Thursday into a place. He has a roof over his head. When you have that, you can do anything. When you have a job secured, he also has that lined up, thankfully, to these resources that I tried to, he took the knowledge and he went with it and he ran with that, just that one act of kindness. Hey, call this number, please, please. I begged him to call this number. He did it. He got into a housing facility with Wounded Warrior Project, and now he's able to start his career with a different program. I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah.
What is stopping veterans that are homeless from finding these resources a lot of times?
So biggest thing, right? You touch on Pacific Northwest vets. Shout out to Josh Wilden, Josh Penner. I was like number 4, number 5 in the group at the time. Um, and we've just thrown everyone into the group. Um, Josh and I were kind of having a talk today about, if you look at the Facebook group, if you go to Pacific Northwest Vets, what it actually says, Washington Veteran Camp, right? We literally wanted to help every veteran we could. And I threw every student veteran resource that I put inside the TMC, TMF. I mean, everyone and their mom has bought on to this Facebook group, and this Facebook group will literally provide the same rack cards that organizations have with inside of the organization, but it's literally at the fingertips, right? It's really at the touch and the tip. And I never had those resources when I came out, was transitioning out of incarceration. I was the guy that was standing in the lines with my hat down, not saying I was a veteran, trying not to give any ID, like just trying to go under the radar, like completely off the radar. I don't want you to know who I am. I'm so I feel so much dispride on myself for having to seek these resources, right? And having it just boom on a Facebook page, you ain't got to go stand in the lines. Like you already know where it's at. You already know where free dental maybe or housing. I don't know how many times we've helped people with this Pacific Northwest vets. I just had one who was going through a domestic violence issue. Heidi had put in Facebook group member had put in basically a call to action out. Myself and Tony Dayton kind of just started strategizing within Messenger, and within 2 months, this guy's gotten everything figured out, charges dropped, and he's back with his VA apartment. Life's going in a different direction, and without having my views of telling someone, "Hey, look, here's my experiences when I went through the justice system," and Tony's like, "Hey, we can get these resources here and these resources here," right? Like we've been intrinsically Tony through the Dom, me through prison. We understand where everything is intersecting, but to take you from point A to point B in my life would take you years. You going from point A to point B and needing a resource on Pacific Northwest vets takes you 10 seconds. And that's really the huge momentum that we've tried to build with Pacific Northwest vets is being that connector. And I've convinced Josh, I don't know how many times, that we should take this into a nonprofit realm and that we should make this something that others can really lead into. But then you start getting into hey, you're taking veterans away from, because there is a numbers game and a profitability that lives inside of that nonprofit where veterans compete for those federal dollars and fundings. And that's kind of where shit gets crazy, right? As a veteran, you look in and you're like, you don't see that aspect of the business until you're really aspect of the
business. I'm glad you brought that up. I want to say something for individuals going through the process. It is a absolute disservice to anyone going to seek resources for you to try to hog them or hide them from another organization. We're dealing with homeless vets, people who have gone to war, might have experienced shit you never, ever, ever wanted to in your entire life. And those same individuals are asking for help. That's a huge step. Why hide them to yourself for your numbers game to the government? Shame on
Yeah,
you. If this is you, shame on you. And I really hope it's not if you're listening to this, because damn,
I mean, it's the same
it
thing
must be
that we
hard to
see
sleep at
for
night.
it's the same thing that we see for private prisons or just prisons in general, right? There's a
Mm,
certain amount per head that we get.
yes.
Not saying that that's persistently a strenuous topic that we talk about with inside of veteran community services, but trust me, there's some benefits that exist to housing our nation's heroes. And what's to say that they shouldn't be housed? But to make it a profitable or an intrinsically designed system that someone, I mean, someone's not making, tens of thousands of dollars off of placing a homeless veteran. No one's taking a trip to the Bahamas or, Tahiti. But at the same time, there, as a nonprofit, you exist to solve a problem. If you put your nonprofit out of business, it's because you've solved that community problem, right? We can see veteran homelessness start to go like this all the time, but when funding goes down, like then you're going to see homelessness go back up, like it
Hmm.
has. Suicide can go down, but homelessness is still at an all-time high. I don't know what anybody is saying or kidding. 1 in 4 in Tacoma alone are homeless veterans, and we have nowhere the resources for them. But if we make it a monopolized standard to where, hey, it's $500 a day for a veteran, and it only costs them $200 to house them per day, which is a lot of money if you think about it, then it becomes a profitable business to make sure that there's a homeless population that's persistent. And some
Hmm.
veterans, to that point, they don't want the responsibility. They just want the disability check, have no responsibilities, and live homeless. And there's a magnitude of things that we could talk about there, but it just starts from jumping in, right?
100%, brother. It absolutely does. One thing I want to touch on is, God, it can be sometimes difficult talking about this. What would you say to anybody who is hesitant about seeking help? I can be honest, I've been prideful at times. It wasn't until just last year, I was sitting down in the same room I'm in right now with Jason Jarman, and he tells me, "Hey, you should file for disability, man. You got some fucking issues, dude. You shouldn't have gone through that alone, and you're still dealing with it alone. How the hell do you climb around inside of escalators with the shit you've had done in your life? Like, it's not sustainable." I didn't realize until last year where I tore my shoulder that I had some issues on, even more than that. And I did some serious soul searching, and I started reaching out for help. What would the average person do? How can what would you say to them if they were on the fence about asking for help?
I'm probably the worst person to ask this question, right? Because in my whole life, helping the people that I've helped during that time, I was probably the person that needed the most, right? Uh, when I'm at some of the lowest points in my life, I'll be the person volunteering to my community because it makes me feel good to give back, but it doesn't address any problem. Like, I could be living with inside of my car, homeless, still going to school, doing good grades, and slap hands with everyone and but eventually I gotta retreat to the car and sit, think about life, right? Like for everyone, there has to be that snapping. There has to be a moment in your life where you had enough. And that had enough is like had enough with relationships, enough financial responsibilities, had enough with faith. And once you kind of make that decision, like think the rest is history. But getting to the point is so much trauma, right? Is so much work. Uh, um, and it causes more pain sometimes trying to fix the old thing. Um, yeah, it's a really hard topic to talk about, right? Because like there's not a solution that fixes everyone's problems. there isn't just one method that's like laid out from the VA and like, here you go, you're going to, or life isn't going to come at you sideways. Childhood trauma could, come up, or combat stress going to come back up. Like, the solution is different for everyone.
Absolutely, brother. And I'm thankful that you gave that answer. It's a generic ass question, and two, I really think it's important that everybody share their own perspective, because we all have different experiences. I'm not a good person to ask, what would you say to somebody who needs resources? I would defer you immediately to a multitude of the people who I know who can do it. And you know what? I can honestly say with confidence now, knowing what I know, and having said this before and had it come to fruition successfully for another individual. Go to PNW Vets. Just ask the group. Ask the group. Thomas might be like, hey, bro, I got you. Come on. We're going to figure it out together. I had Tony reach out to me and be like, hey, bro, we'll figure this out. Come on, let's work together. And I'm starting with him. Yep. Everybody has a journey when it comes to transitioning, and there's never been a bad time to start. I would start today, and I would start on PNW Vets. You'd be surprised what great and powerful, loving human beings with kindness in the heart reach out to you. There's one last question I really have to know. It's a part of the series. It's what I try to do every single time. The words service and sacrifice. To some, they mean so many different things. So the word service and the word sacrifice, what are those? If I said, hey, how would you explain service and sacrifice to somebody? What would that mean to you?
Well, I'd like to just take a moment to just kind of, I guess, give context to those two words, right? Mm-hmm. Service to me is so many. And sacrifice, there is so much sacrifice in myself. And then I look at soldiers, sailors, Marines, Space Force, Air Force, Coasties, yeah, you're in there too. People who have lost loved ones, right? And I've had the privilege of working with Monica McNeil and Washington State Gold Star families. And I could never, in all the time that I've served, in every honorable action I've ever, could I ever measure up to the service and that those families had given us. So when I think about service and I think about freedom, it's in a very focused lens, right? Because the service to my country was something I get benefits for, right? I got home loan and education benefits, and unfortunately disabled ever since I was 21. But I still get to come home. I still get to have a family. I still get to watch my kids from me. And that's a sacrifice that I think I've paid to my country. But I don't suffer silently and sometimes alone like Gold Star families do. And I don't say that to like push it off to like be some grandiose person or like, hey, my service didn't matter. No, my service mattered. I've been 100% disabled ever since I was 21 years old. Nothing's changed. The only thing that changed within that 17-year period was the percentage of my rating. My disabilities never, right? But my value for my service, my value for the sacrifices, quote unquote, I say that really hard, sacrifices that I had to make for 18 months or 6 years, right? They amount to nothing when placed in the lens of losing a family member to suicide or in the war, right? How that mother feels every Christmas. Because I couldn't imagine, as someone who has a 3-year-old son and a 15-year-old stepdaughter, couldn't imagine not seeing them every single night and being thankful for what I have and what I've contributed to, that your family's contributed to, that others' families have contributed to, right? So when I think of that service and I think of that sacrifice, not only do I think of Gold Star families, but when I'm sitting at a stoplight and I see a homeless veteran, I'm thankful. Believe it or not. Because I know that person standing on the corner that is self-identified as a veteran. A lot of people don't want to self-identify, right? Could have had bad time in service or just, I did my job, whatever. Just, it's no checkbox, right? I know that veteran has made more sacrifices to me to give me the freedom to be able to judge him on the side of the road. Because his service equaled the sacrifice that I'm not paying. I'm not sleeping on the side of the road. I'm thankful for his service, because I want to be able to be free unless he was right next to me shooting the weapon. But his sacrifice is way more than what my sacrifice is, because his expectations for what he thought was going to come home and be, that's to me where I'm like, that's where I should be in service, right? Service, it wasn't just like in the service, it's in service to my community. It's showing that my kids have good role models and people that live within the community. It's showing that veteran, hey man, I may not give you money because I don't believe in giving you money here, because there's resources that are right down the road. But like, hey, I don't know how many times I've pulled off on the side of the road and just like, dude, tell me your story. Like, how are you here? I've met people who are 100% disabled, getting like $3,000 a month plus. They're living on the side of the road stacking cash because they don't want anything to do with responsibilities. And then I know people who have like 3, 4 kids that have tried to help them and get them out of poverty, and they just cool doing life, right? Or they want help. They just don't know where to start, and telling them where to start. Or you got a cell phone? Pacific Northwest Vets. Oh, you're right down the road from Tacoma Rescue Mission? Hey, man, 2 p.m. Show up, right? There's a veteran coordinator there. So for me, I think service and sacrifice is just the overarching thing for our country. Like, I'm grateful for my service. I made a lot of sacrifices, quote unquote. But there are so many battles that like we as a country give into, and we don't honor people like Gold Star families enough. We don't honor our homeless veterans enough. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that position. They wouldn't have those narratives. So I contribute a lot of my service and sacrifice to the people that I see in the community. So I know that may be like a kind of weird way to answer that question, but I don't think anything that I did in my life is weird or like special, or right. I signed a contract. But when I come home, am I able to bounce back? Am I supported? Do I see the damage that happened from the war as a veteran and continue to tell others in that 99% who are unlike me what that service and sacrifice means? I think that's my responsibility.
Wow, brother. There's a lot to be said about what you just said, but I want to let those words kind of resonate with everybody as they resonate with me. One thing I would like to touch on that you did, you kind of removed you, and it's a selfless statement that you just made, and I agree with 100%. I find so much perspective from listening to other people's explanation of what those two words mean to them, and wow, it's no secret that you care so much about the rest of the world, man. There's absolute beauty that can be found within what you say. And I say absolute like black and white, is plain old beautiful that you care about other human beings to stop on the side of the road and, hey, tell me what's going on. Hey, why don't you ball out? You providing resources from the human being. A hand up is much better than a handout any day. And I love that you agree with that way, and not just in words but in actions, because wow, we need more than that. We need more of that in the world. We need more of that throughout different areas. Tacoma especially, like we talked about, a huge homeless population of vets right there. Not people who smoke fentanyl in elevators and trash them and throw things at me while I'm working on the escalators. I'm talking about homeless veterans who just don't know what normal life is like after dealing with war. I think we can all take a lesson of compassion, empathy, care, kindness, all these things that the Bible wants to teach us as youth in Bible school, or that we see in feel good movies like Avatar, the last Airbender, all those beautiful lessons in Princess Mononoke and the rest of the animes out there, or Avatar with the blue people. Even every single story that we've learned from these beautiful war movies about taking care of your brother, it doesn't have to end just because our service does. And I think you exemplify that. And for that, man, I'm not gonna salute you because I don't do that shit, but I commend you. But I commend you, my brother. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for sharing your mindset, because the mindset is so much more powerful than our experiences, because we can continue to affect other human beings. So thank you, brother. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And I look forward to doing this again. And I also want to say a special thank you to everybody who's been listening so far. My lovely listeners, much love to all of you. Happy Friday, motherfuckers. I just want to say something to anybody who is listening to this and is going through a tough time. I want to remind you of something. The greatness and power that you have resonating with inside of you. It was instilled to you by your mother and father. It was instilled to you by your friends, your brothers and sisters, your teachers, your that random person who didn't know you were going through, but still gave you extra candy on Halloween because they wanted you to have a fun time because you're a child. Take take that and apply it to everything else in your life. You're never alone. There's always something you can grow through instead of just go through. And no matter where you're at in life and no matter what you've gone through, you can always fight yourself back into a positive situation. So stay positive, my brothers and sisters out there. Much love to you all. Thank you for listening. And enough waffling for me. Bye bye.